Alright, let's talk about Korea. It's a peninsula jutting out from Eastern Asia, beautiful place really. But here's the kicker, it's split in two, North Korea and South Korea. Two countries, same people, wildly different stories. In the north, you've got the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Emphasis on People's Republic because it's run by a supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. Now head south and it's like stepping into a different dimension. South Korea, officially the Republic of Korea, is all K-pop, Samsung phones, and bustling democracy. So, how did this whole divided peninsula thing happen? Well, buckle up because we're going back in time. The story starts after World War II. Japan had been running the Korean peninsula, but when they lost the war, Korea was up for grabs. The Allies, namely the US and the Soviet Union, decided to split the country in two. The Soviets took the north, installing a communist government. The US took the south, backing a more capitalist democratic system. And just like that, bam, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel. In 1950, the North, backed by the Soviets and China, decided they wanted the whole peninsula for themselves. They invaded the South, kicking off the Korean War. Now, before we get all tangled up in the Korean War, let's rewind a bit further. For centuries, Korea was a unified kingdom, doing its own thing. But in the early 20th century, things took a turn. Japan, with its imperial ambitions, decided it wanted a piece of the Korean peninsula. In 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea, kicking off a brutal 35-year occupation. They shut down Korean schools, banned the Korean language, and basically tried to erase Korean culture. The Korean people, understandably, weren't too thrilled about this whole situation. Resistance movements popped up, fighting for independence. But Japan's defeat in World War II finally brought an end to their Korean occupation. The country was free from Japan, but the seeds of division had already been sown. With Japan out of the picture, Korea was like a prize waiting to be claimed. And who should come knocking but the two big superpowers of the day, the United States and the Soviet Union. Each had their own vision for Korea, and neither was keen on sharing. The Soviets wanted to spread their communist ideology. The Americans were all about containing communism and promoting democracy, so the Allies decided to temporarily divide Korea along the 38th parallel. The Soviets got the north, the Americans got the south. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a way to get things organized after the war. The problem was, nobody bothered to ask the Koreans what they wanted. Remember that whole temporary division thing? Well, it didn't last long. On June 25, 1950, North Korean troops backed by the Soviets and Chinese poured across the 38th parallel. Their goal, reunite Korea by force under communist rule. The United States, caught off guard but not backing down, jumped into the fray, leading a UN coalition to defend South Korea. What followed was a brutal, back-and-forth conflict that raged across the peninsula. After 3 long years of fighting, a ceasefire agreement was finally signed in 1953. But here's the kicker: the war never officially ended. The Korean War might have ended in a stalemate, but it had a profound impact on the peninsula. Two Koreas emerged from the ashes, forever scarred by the conflict and set on radically different paths. In the north, Kim Il-sung established a totalitarian regime with himself at the helm. He rebuilt the country along communist lines, emphasizing self-reliance and absolute loyalty to the state. The South, meanwhile, went in a completely different direction. After years of political turmoil, they established a democratic government and embraced a capitalist economy. And so, the two Koreas, once united by history and culture, found themselves on opposite sides of the ideological divide. Fast forward to the present day, and what do we have? Two Koreas, still technically at war, separated by a heavily fortified border known as the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. It's the most heavily armed border in the world. But here's the real nail-biter. North Korea has nukes. They've been busy developing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. These tests have rattled the international community. The UN has slapped sanctions on North Korea, trying to pressure them into giving up their nuclear program. But so far, Kim Jong-un seems more interested in playing a game of how many missiles can we make than playing nice with the rest of the world. North Korea has a massive army too. It's a tense situation with the potential to escalate quickly. Now you're probably wondering, what's life actually like in North Korea? It's a question that has intrigued and baffled outsiders for decades. The truth is, North Korea is a secretive state, often dubbed the Hermit Kingdom for its isolationist policies. Information is tightly controlled, and getting a glimpse behind the curtain isn't easy. What we do know is that life in North Korea is a far cry from the glitz and glam of its southern neighbor. The country follows a strict ideology known as Juche, which emphasizes self-reliance and unwavering loyalty to the Kim family. Daily life is heavily regimented, with the government controlling everything from education and employment to housing and even hairstyles. Criticism of the government can land you and your family in a labor camp. Despite the hardships, the North Korean people have shown remarkable resilience. Now, it hasn't always been all doom and gloom between the two Koreas. Back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a glimmer of hope. South Korea, under President Kim Dae-jung, implemented what was known as the Sunshine Policy. The idea was to thaw relations with the North through engagement, economic cooperation, and a whole lot of diplomacy. There were family reunions for families separated by the Korean War, joint economic projects, and even a historic summit between the leaders of the two Koreas in 2000. But like a fragile flower, the Sunshine Policy wilted under the harsh realities of North Korean politics. The roller coaster of inter-Korean relations took another nosedive, leaving everyone wondering if peace was nothing more than a distant dream. The Korean conflict isn't just a regional issue. It has global implications, drawing in major powers like the United States, China, Japan, and Russia. It's a geopolitical pressure cooker, with everyone trying to avoid a catastrophic blow-up. The United States, as South Korea's ally, has a vested interest in maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula. China, North Korea's neighbor and biggest trading partner, is walking a tightrope. They don't want to see a collapse of the North Korean regime, which could lead to chaos on their border. But they're also not too keen on a nuclear-armed North Korea, which could destabilize the entire region. The Korean peninsula remains a tinderbox, and the world is holding its breath, hoping for a peaceful resolution. So, what's next for the Korean peninsula? That's the million-dollar question, folks, and nobody has a crystal ball. The future is about as clear as a bowl of kimchi jjigae after a few too many soju shots. But we can look at the potential scenarios, right? Option 1, things stay pretty much the same. North Korea keeps developing nukes, the international community keeps slapping on sanctions, and everyone just kind of tiptoes around each other. Option 2, diplomacy actually works. The US, China, and South Korea managed to convince Kim Jong-un that giving up his nukes is in his best interest. Maybe there are promises of aid, security guarantees, a lifetime supply of choco pies, who knows? The point is, peace is brokered, tensions ease, and everyone breathes a collective sigh of relief. But hold your horses, because there's option 3, things go sideways. Now, let's talk about a dream. A long shot, but a dream nonetheless. Korean reunification. Imagine a peninsula, no longer divided but whole again. North and South Korea, back together like a perfectly grilled bulgogi taco. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? Families separated for decades, finally reunited. A shared culture and history, no longer hostage to political divisions. The economic powerhouse of the South merging with the untapped potential of the North. It's a beautiful vision. A beacon of hope in a world often shrouded in darkness. But let's be real, folks. Reunification is a long shot, a distant goal rather than an imminent reality. Here's the thing about the Korean peninsula. It's not just about the Koreas. It's a geopolitical chessboard with major powers like the US, China, Russia, and Japan all vying for influence. Any future scenario, whether it's continued stalemate, diplomatic breakthrough, or God forbid conflict, has ripple effects across the region and the world. The US, with its commitment to South Korea's security, will continue to play a pivotal role. They'll need to balance their desire for denuclearization with the need to avoid provoking North Korea. China, as North Korea's closest ally and economic lifeline, holds a lot of cards too. They can choose to pressure North Korea, using their economic leverage to push for denuclearization and stability. The future of the Korean Peninsula, folks, is a team effort, whether the team realizes it or not. Alright, let's talk geopolitics, folks. This whole North Korea situation isn't just a local squabble. It's like a loud, obnoxious party guest that everyone in the neighborhood can hear. And trust me, nobody wants this party to get out of hand. The Korean Peninsula sits in the middle of East Asia, a region packed with economic powerhouses, and enough military hardware to make Tony Stark jealous. You've got China, the rising giant, right next door. Japan, with its pacifist constitution but growing unease about North Korea's antics. And let's not forget Russia, lurking up north with its own strategic interests. Now imagine your neighbor starts lobbing missiles over your head. Not exactly conducive to a productive workday, right? The Korean Peninsula is a powder keg, and any spark could set off a chain reaction with global consequences. Now let's talk about the big boys on the block, the United States and China. They're like two heavyweight boxers circling each other in the ring, each wary of the other's strength but unwilling to back down. And the Korean Peninsula? That's the ring, folks, where their geopolitical rivalry plays out in real time. The US, with its pivot to Asia strategy and its long-standing alliance with South Korea, is committed to maintaining its presence in the region. They see a nuclear-armed North Korea as a direct threat to their interests and a challenge to their global leadership. But here's the catch. They also need China's cooperation to rein in Kim Jong-un. China, on the other hand, is playing a delicate game. They don't want a nuclear North Korea on their doorstep, but they also don't want to see the Kim regime collapse, which could lead to chaos on their border and potentially a unified Korea allied with the US. It's a tough spot to be in, folks. So, you've got these two superpowers, each with their own agenda, trying to navigate a crisis that could spiral out of control at any moment. It's a high-stakes game of diplomacy, with the fate of the Korean Peninsula and potentially the world hanging in the balance. While the US and China are busy playing geopolitical chess, let's not forget about the countries caught directly in the crosshairs, Japan and South Korea. They're the ones living with the very real, very scary possibility of North Korean aggression on a daily basis. Japan, with its pacifist constitution, has long relied on the US for its security, but with North Korea lobbing missiles over their territory, they're starting to feel a little vulnerable, like that kid in dodgeball who always gets picked last. They're boosting their military spending, talking about developing their own nuclear deterrent, a move that would send shockwaves through the region. South Korea, on the other hand, is caught between a rock and a hard place. They want peace, they want reunification, but they also don't want to be bullied by their northern neighbor. They're reliant on the US for military support, but they also need to maintain a working relationship with China, their biggest trading partner. It's like trying to juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. The Korean conflict isn't some abstract geopolitical game for Japan and South Korea. It's a matter of life and death, and their futures are inextricably linked to the actions of their unpredictable neighbor. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, folks: nuclear weapons. Because as long as North Korea keeps churning out nukes like their Pez dispensers, the world is a much more dangerous place. And the scary part is, it's not just about North Korea. See, Kim Jong-un's little nuclear program has a nasty habit of inspiring others. If North Korea can get away with it, why not Iran? Why not other rogue states looking for a quick and easy way to throw their weight around? It's a recipe for nuclear proliferation, a nightmare scenario where more and more countries get their hands on the ultimate weapon. And it's not just about the number of nukes either. It's about the technology, the know-how, the potential for these weapons to fall into the wrong hands. Terrorist groups, non-state actors, these are the folks who don't play by the rules, who might not think twice about using a nuclear weapon to achieve their goals. The Korean conflict, with its nuclear dimension, isn't just a regional issue. It's a global threat, a stark reminder that in the 21st century, the security of every nation is interconnected. We're all in this together, folks, whether we like it or not. The Korean Peninsula, a land of stunning beauty and resilient people. It's a place where the past weighs heavily on the present, where the threat of conflict simmers. We've seen the history, the heartache, the moments of hope and despair. The fate of millions hangs in the balance. But giving up isn't an option. Peace is precious, diplomacy matters, and the pursuit of a better future is worth it. The road ahead is long and uncertain, but we can't lose sight of the goal: a peaceful, denuclearized Korean peninsula.